Hey guys, how's it going? Today we're going to be talking about Amazon's S3 service. This is a continuation of my series on cloud computing and Amazon's web services. So if you haven't seen the first video of this entire series, I highly recommend you guys to check it out. I'll put the link of that video up here or something. So when I was starting to work on this video, I started to realize that I was just making this I was trying to explain everything I knew about S3. It was just getting too long, so I decided to split this entire little mini series on what S3 is into multiple parts. So far I planned 4 parts. So just to give you guys a brief overview of the parts, part 1, which is the video that you're watching right now, will be me mostly just describing what S3 is at from a product standpoint, what it is and why you should use it, those kind of information. A little bit high level, but it will go over all the feature sets of S3 that I find pretty important when you're trying to decide on what kind of storage solution that you want to use. Part 2 will be me diving into the actual code. Not that there is that much code for working with S3. It'll be using the Amazon console, which is our GUI interface, to be able to create new objects and things like that. Just work with S3. Also maybe go into the CLI and the SDK and using that. Part 3 will be about one of the most interesting features that S3 has, which is static web hosting. And it's a very important part of web development, and it's used in a lot of architectures, and it might be, I thought it would be worth an entire video on just talking about the web hosting portion of S3. Finally, I want to take all of the teachings and learnings from this little mini series on S3 and create maybe an ugly version of a Dropbox clone or something like that. So yeah, I hope you guys are excited for this little mini series, and yeah, let's get straight down to the guts of this introduction. So what is S3? So S3's acronym stands for Simple Storage Service. The reason why it's S3 is because there's 3 S's in that acronym. If you are watching this video and you get one thing out of this video, I think paying attention to this definition of what S3 is probably the most important. It's an object-based storage that is super secure and reliable and redundant, that allows you to store your data and manage your data using HTTP protocols. So that's kind of what S3 is in a nutshell, but I feel like Amazon has done a really good job adding a lot of different features that makes it really attractive in a sense for developers to want to use. Now, here's a few terminologies that you need to know when you're working with S3. Number 1 is IAM. Which is another service that Amazon uses, which is Identity Access Management. Now I'll go into kind of a separate video on what it is, but at a high level, just understand that it's a way for you as a developer or a DevOps administrator to be able to create roles and some kind of policies that gives your users other people in your AWS account access to certain AWS resources. So this is one of the ways that S3 manages security. For example, buckets is another thing. Amazon's concept of a bucket is just a unique domain namespace where you can store your files or data into. And so you'll hear a lot of concepts of S3 buckets. Just create an S3 bucket and then you can store your files into it. And I'll get into that more later, but those are really the only 2 acronym terminologies you need to know. So let's go down to kind of what's important to know about S3. First of all, as I briefly mentioned before, Amazon S3 is an object-based storage. Now, to really understand what that means, you kind of have to understand that there are different types of ways to store your data. And it should be kind of obvious, but if you never really thought about it, you might not have known that there's different ways to store your data. So when we talk about S3, the other storage types that we commonly talk about or discuss is file systems and block storage. Those are kind of the more traditional ways of storing files and data, but just to briefly tell you what they are, file storage, everyone knows or have used some sort of file system. file systems, everyone has done used a file system before. If you use the computer before, you've seen a file system storage. So essentially it's it's on your operating system. You open Explorer or something like that, and there'll be folders, and inside folders there'll be more folders and files and other data types that'll be stored in there, and that's a file system. And it's a very common structure that's used. Other storage method is block storage. Now, if you ever see a block storage, is when you take a piece of data, a lot of databases use block storage, but the core idea is that you take a piece of data and then you break it down into blocks of data and chunks, and then that gets stored in some hard drive, for example. And there's a lot of benefits and disadvantages. Just like any engineering problem, there's a lot of trade-offs to be made, and we could get into that into another video, but just know that there's these different types of storage. And the reason why I talk about this is because object store is not like these two, but you might get confused when you start using S3, and if you don't read through it carefully, you might think that it's a file system base, especially because the Amazon console doesn't really help you, because when you go into it, it almost looks like you have a file structure. But the thing is, Amazon S3 is an object-based storage, and what that means is it's essentially a key value store, and the value happens to be the data that you're storing. If you ever use JavaScript or Java or any kind of languages that supports objects, you'll have the concept of key value pairs. It's essentially a hash function that, given a unique key, you get basically constant time access to the data that you want. And that's essentially the concept that Amazon S3 is going. And one unique thing that you need to know about this is that because it's an object-based storage, Amazon S3 has a flat structure. Now, this is kind of getting to the nitty-gritty of things, and in terms of it, it will be a lot more clear if I showed you an example. But just know that Amazon S3 is a flat structure, and any kind of data hierarchy, folder hierarchy things that you see on the Amazon console is actually not really there. It's a flat structure, so everything has a unique address, and that unique address gets you the unique data that you store with that key. Another thing that S3 does really well is you can add metadata on top of it, so it gives you tagging and all these other kind of things that are useful, and you could do this because this is an object-based storage. Now, so that's kind of what object-based storage is. But why else would you want to use it? In the previous video, we talked about why you should think about using the cloud. Why would anyone want to use the cloud rather than spinning up their own infrastructure? Now, Amazon S3 follows this the very similar concepts that I brought up last time in my last video. And the real value prop of cloud computing and using S3 is that you're getting infrastructure as a service. So let me go over some features that Amazon S3 offers, and it will clearly explain this whole concept of infrastructure as a service. So one of the key features of Amazon S3 is that it's super reliable. Now, to give you the exact number of how reliable it is, it's 99.999999, basically 9 to the 11th point place or whatever decimal point, reliable. To put it in perspective, what that really means is that you'll lose one file for every 100 billion files that you store in S3. So just think about that number. I can't really even imagine that number, but that's how redundant and reliable S3 storage is. And they accomplish this with a variety of methods. Of mainly it's duplications and redundancy in multiple regions, and I could talk about that in another video, but just know that they're just providing you this as a raw service. You create a S3 bucket, you store an object in S3, and that bucket, all the files in that bucket just gets that kind of resilience for free, essentially. And not only that, because S3 is a managed service, the infrastructure is managed, when you're trying to access that S3 file, that also is auto scaled, meaning that if you have like all of a sudden a million people trying to hit that same file, you're essentially okay. Like your server's not going to crash because it's not running on any of your servers. That file is just being hosted in the cloud somewhere, so they'll just spin up multiple instances and replications of that file as they see fit, and this is all done by Amazon. So that's like, as one developer, it gives you so much power and like kind of worry free in a sense that you could serve like traffic or host like websites on just on S3, and you're able to serve traffic like almost infinitely. So there's that kind of reliability. So that's another reason why it's so amazing. So another really amazing feature is versioning. So Amazon S3 has like a very easy way to version your files. So if you like drop a new item into a bucket, you could like version it. So let's say that you accidentally deleted it, then you at least have the previous version, or that particular version that you deleted you'll still have. So like there's all these kind of features that are just there if you just use it. And if you wanted to like kind of spin up your own service that's like this, it would be actually really difficult to do. So those are kind of like the main features that Amazon S3 has and why you would want to use it. So yeah, so that's kind of what S3 is in a nutshell. It's one of the most like popular services, and it's really common, and it's really flexible. And what I mean by that is I'll give you like a few examples of like what you would use S3 for. Not only is it really great for just storing like just raw files. So the obvious use case is you want to store like images or something like that, and you could create some kind of distribution network using S3, and you could like pull images at really high speeds, etc. You could leverage their lifecycle methods. That's something I didn't cover, but yeah, it's kind of important. Okay, so lifecycle methods is pretty important. What it is Amazon S3 has like different tiers of reliability and redundancy. So I mentioned that it's like 99. The standard is 99.9 to the 11th power, 11th decimal point. But they also have something called S3 infrequent access, which is like the 4 nines, which is 99.99% redundancy. And then finally they have something called Glacier, which is something for archiving your files. So it takes a long time to retrieve those files, for example. And Amazon also has something called Lifecycle Policies that automatically, based on your settings, convert like some files from standard to infrequent access to Glacier automatically. So this is a way to manage like files so that they're kind of more redundant if they're more active, and then as you go down, it basically makes it cheaper the further down like that tier of redundancy and reliability goes, right? Like a good example of this use case would be like in Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Let's say you have an image that's 10 years old, chances are you're not gonna want to see that every day or something like that. But let's say you just posted like a new hot like I don't know, summer body like workout picture or something like that, that might need like a lot of replications and like in multiple CDNs, etc. So but yeah, so that's infrequent access. That's what lifecycle policies are. One of the cool stories and success stories of S3 is that Dropbox, when they first started, I read this somewhere, so don't quote me on it, but I believe Dropbox, when they first started, they just wrapped the S3 API into a very nice UI, and that's how they made Dropbox. I don't know how true that story is, but it's something I heard, and that's kind of the inspiration for like my final little project that I'm gonna do with using S3 as like one of the main core like pieces and like functional engine pieces, essentially the backbone of my final project for this little series. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick video. I'm trying to make this really quick and concise so that you guys could get the most out of it. Before I go, a bit of an update. I'm moving right now, and it's a nightmare of a thing to do. I mean, I'm super excited for the move itself, but right now my house is a mess. I'm super tired from just like lifting all these like boxes and furniture around. Yeah, it's a lot. I have a lot on my plate right now. I have a toddler who's like 1.5, and I have another baby on the way. So my wife is pregnant, so she's not really helping with the move. She's just, you know, I mean, of course she's helping. She's watching the baby and growing like eyeballs and like feet and stuff in her stomach or in her womb and stuff. But yeah, like I'm pretty busy right now. I'm trying to make these videos, but if I miss one or two, if I miss a week or something like that, I hope you guys are okay with it. But yeah, once I move, I'm gonna have like a dedicated YouTube space, which I'm super excited to like you know, like kit out and, you know, set up. I also want to get into like hardware, so I have a lot of ideas on hardware and learning electronics, because I don't know if I ever shared this story, but I used to be a program manager for a hardware company, so I have a lot of experience in the process of making hardware, but I've never gone through like the engineering process. I don't know, I always thought that I wasn't smart enough when I was doing that job, but after going through like becoming an engineer and learning, like just always constantly challenging my mind, and then, you know, I don't know, over time, over the past few years, I've started to get a lot of confidence in my mental abilities, and I feel like I could learn anything that I set my mind to now. And I feel like learning electronics and building like hardware was always one of my like dream goals. Like one of my like passions, I guess, is one of the things I really wanted to do ever since I was really young was to think of like some product and then make it. And usually the products that I wanted to make involve some electronics and some software. So yeah, so I don't know, I think I want to try doing that. I have some ideas, and of course I'm going to document it here for you guys to watch, but that's kind of a minor channel update. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys are also enjoying the content that I'm bringing out. Recently I got some really awesome news that one of my my YouTube subscribers who reached out to me on like Facebook and stuff like that, he recently got a job as an Android developer, and you know, like just hearing that was like made me making this videos like all the while worth it. Like I don't know, it was just like really worth it, and it made me reflect on why I'm doing all of this in the first place. So it was good. Yeah, it was really good. Maybe one day I'll bring him on and try to interview him and, you know, get his perspective on like how to make the transition happen. But you know, so yeah, it's definitely possible. You could become an engineer too. You know, I'm not special or anything, so just keep at it. You know, chug along on your legal problems, and also, you know, prepare your like resume and everything like that. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.